In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
In the heart of Metropolis, reality screamed. It wasn't the familiar roar of a boom tube or the crackling distortion of a time-displaced speedster. This was something older, something that tasted of entropy and rebirth simultaneously. The sky above Centennial Park split open, not torn but unraveled, as if the universe itself had decided that the laws of physics were negotiable. Civilians scattered as golden light poured through the wound in space-time, so brilliant that phone cameras exploded, and eyewitness accounts would later contradict each other on every detail except one. The light felt aware. Then he fell. A figure wreathed in psychic fire crashed into the earth with the force of a tactical warhead, cratering the park and sending shockwaves that shattered windows for 3 blocks. Emergency services mobilized within seconds. The Justice League's alert systems lit up like Christmas. And high above the chaos, Clark Kent abandoned his interview mid-sentence, his super hearing catching something impossible beneath the destruction. A heartbeat that resonated with power he'd only felt once before, standing in the presence of gods. Superman arrived to find the crater still glowing with residual energy that made his skin prickle. At the center stood a man. No, calling him a man was like calling the sun a campfire. He was easily 8 feet tall, clad in armor that seemed to shift between golden masterwork and simple traveling leathers, depending on the angle of observation. His face was ageless and terrible in its perfection, neither young nor old, with eyes that held the weight of millennia. Those eyes fixed on Superman with an intensity that made the Kryptonian instinctively brace for combat. "Fascinating," the stranger said, his voice a blend of authority and genuine curiosity. "You're not human, extraterrestrial by the biosignature, yet you've bound yourself to their protection." He tilted his head, and Superman felt something invisible brush against his mind. Not an attack, but an analysis so swift and complete it was over before he could resist. Kryptonian, the last son of a dead world playing shepherd to a species that will never truly accept you. How? Sentimental. Who are you? Superman's voice carried the edge of command he reserved for genuine threats. That energy signature, whatever brought you here. Half the East Coast felt it. The stranger looked around, taking in the assembled crowd of emergency responders. The news helicopters circling like carrion birds, the trembling civilians recording everything on their devices. His expression shifted through calculation, assessment, and something that might have been disappointment. "I am called many things. Revelation, the anathema, the master of mankind." His gaze returned to Superman, and for a moment, the air between them ignited with barely contained power. "But you may call me Emperor, and I appear to be very far from home." Before Superman could respond, the Emperor's attention snapped skyward. "Impressive. Your planetary defensive network is more sophisticated than I anticipated. Multiple enhanced individuals converging on this location, some metahuman, others technological. At least 2 magic users and 1 entity that exists partially outside conventional space-time." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd waged wars across galaxies. "They think to contain me. How delightfully optimistic." Wonder Woman materialized first, her lasso of truth already in hand, followed by Batman's Batwing descending in silent predator mode. The Flash vibrated into existence, Green Lantern's emerald aura casting sharp shadows, and Cyborg phased in through a digital portal, his weapon systems hot. The Justice League had assembled in under 90 seconds, forming a loose perimeter around the crater. The Emperor regarded them with the detached interest of a scientist examining fascinating specimens. The warrior bears divine artifacts, Olympian craftsmanship, unless I'm mistaken. The speedster taps into an extra-dimensional energy field that violates causality. The cyborg is a remarkable fusion of organic and mechanical systems, though primitive by certain standards. The lantern wields emotional spectrum weaponry, weaponized willpower given form. And the detective, his eyes locked onto Batman. Your baseline human, no enhancements, no powers, yet you stand among gods and do not flinch. Either you're the bravest or the most foolish creature I've encountered in 10,000 years. You've been alive for 10,000 years? Flash asked, because of course he did. Longer. The Emperor's psychic presence expanded, and every hero felt it. A pressure against their minds like standing at the bottom of an ocean. Not hostile, not yet, but undeniably there. I have guided humanity through the age of strife, built empires that spanned galaxies, and held back horrors that would break your sanity with their mere existence. I am the apex of human evolution, the inevitable endpoint of your species' potential. He paused, and his next words carried absolute certainty. And I do not belong in this universe. The Emperor raised one hand, and golden light coalesced around his fingers. Psychic energy made manifest, obeying laws that shouldn't exist in DC's reality. It flickered, stuttered, then stabilized into a form that made Dr. Fate, watching through magical sensors from the watchtower, whisper a single word: impossible. Your universe operates on different principles, the Emperor continued, studying the energy with scientific fascination. The warp, the Imperium, it doesn't exist here, not as I know it. Yet consciousness still generates power, emotion still bleeds into reality. Your magic is simply a different framework for the same fundamental truth. Will shapes existence. His smile widened. I can work with this. Superman stepped forward, positioning himself between the Emperor and the civilians still being evacuated. You're not going anywhere until we understand what you are and what you want. The Emperor met his gaze, and in that moment, Superman saw something that chilled him more than any villain's threat. Absolute conviction backed by terrible power and terrifying intelligence. Then let us talk, the Emperor said. And you can attempt to understand what it means when a god walks among his children, even when those children belong to another reality entirely. If you crave stories where titans of different realities collide and philosophies clash with the force of colliding stars, smash that subscribe button. Witness what happens when the master of mankind faces a universe that doesn't know whether to worship or fear him. The Watchtower's interrogation chamber had been designed to hold metahumans, magical entities, and the occasional time-displaced conqueror. Its walls were reinforced with nth metal, lined with mystical wards courtesy of Zatanni, and monitored by systems that could detect everything from telepathic intrusion to dimensional phasing. Batman had personally overseen every security measure. It had never felt inadequate until now. The Emperor sat in the center of the room, unrestrained, because every attempt to apply containment had failed in ways that defied explanation. Green Lantern's constructs had simply dissolved when they touched him, the willpower construct unraveling as if it had forgotten what it was supposed to be. Wonder Woman's lasso glowed when brought near him, but refused to tighten, as though even magical truth recognized something it couldn't bind. So he sat, perfectly calm, while the Justice League's greatest minds tried to understand what they were dealing with. Batman stood behind the one-way mirror, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture. Beside him, Martian Manhunter's brow furrowed in concentration. His mind is vast, Bruce. I've touched the consciousness of cosmic entities. But this is different. It's not that he's powerful. It's that he's dense. 40,000 years of memories, experiences, knowledge, all compressed into a single consciousness. I can't read him without risking my own sanity. Then we do this the old-fashioned way, Batman growled, activating the communication system. Inside the chamber, Superman sat across from the Emperor, with Wonder Diana standing behind him, her hand resting on her sword hilt. The Man of Steel had insisted on conducting the interview personally, despite Batman's protests. Some situations required power to face power. "Let's start simple," Superman said, his voice measured. "You claim to be from another universe. How did you get here?" The Emperor's eyes, those terrible, ancient eyes, studied Superman with unsettling focus. An experiment gone catastrophically wrong. I was constructing a gateway through a dimension you don't possess, using my own considerable psychic might to hold back entities that exist only to corrupt and destroy. One of my sons made an error that shattered the gateway. Instead of dying, I was pulled through the resultant rift. He paused, and something like regret flickered across his features. I left behind an empire of 1,000,000 worlds. 20 superhuman generals bred from my own genetic template, and a species teetering on the edge of extinction or ascension. They will assume I'm dead. "Sons," Wonder Woman interjected. "You have children." I created 20 Primarchs, genetically engineered demigods designed to lead my armies in the reunification of scattered humanity across the galaxy. They are not children in the traditional sense. They are weapons, leaders, symbols. Half of them betrayed me in a civil war orchestrated by forces you couldn't comprehend. The Emperor's voice carried no emotion, only statement of fact. The other half remained loyal, though loyalty built on fear and worship is always fragile. Superman leaned forward. "You speak of humanity like it's your possession, like you own an entire species." "Because I do." The Emperor's response was immediate, unapologetic. "For 40 millennia, I have guided human evolution. I ended the age of strife. I united Terra, my Earth, under a single banner. I launched the Great Crusade to reclaim the galaxy from aliens, machines, and the corrupted remnants of human civilization. Every decision, every sacrifice, every atrocity committed in my name was necessary for humanity's survival." His gaze hardened. "I have burned worlds to save billions. I have permitted genocides to prevent extinction. I am what humanity needs, not what it wants." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Superman's jaw tightened. That's tyranny. That's pragmatism. The Emperor stood, and despite the vast difference in their philosophical positions, his physical presence commanded attention. "Your universe is young, Superman. Your Earth has known metahumans for mere decades. Mine has endured 38,000 years of apocalyptic horror. We survived AI rebellions that nearly exterminated all organic life. We endured demonic invasions from a dimension of pure malevolence. We fought wars against alien species that viewed humanity as cattle or sport." He walked to the reinforced window, gazing out at Earth floating in the void. "I molded myself into humanity's savior because no one else would. Because the alternative was extinction." Batman's voice crackled through the intercom. You're describing a dictatorship justified by perpetual crisis. That's the oldest tyrant's excuse in history. The Emperor turned toward the mirror, and Batman felt certain those eyes could see through the nth metal shielding, through the mystical wards, straight into his soul. And you, Detective, have contingency plans to kill every one of your allies, should they become compromised. Glass houses, Batman. We both make hard choices others lack the spine to execute. The observation landed like a physical blow. Wonder Woman's hand tightened on her sword. Superman's expression darkened. There's a difference, Superman said quietly, between being prepared and being willing. Batman plans because he trusts us to be better. You act because you think humanity can't be. I act because I've watched humanity fail for 40,000 years. For the first time, genuine emotion cracked through the Emperor's facade. Not anger, but something closer to exhaustion. I've seen utopias collapse into cannibalism. I've watched peaceful civilizations torn apart by demonic possession. I've held dying children who begged me to save them from horrors you've never imagined. Don't lecture me about trust when your greatest threat is a bald industrialist with a grudge and some kryptonite. The room fell silent. Then John's voice whispered in Superman's mind. He believes every word. Whatever his universe contains, it broke something fundamental in him. He's not lying. He's traumatized on a civilizational scale. Superman took a breath, recalibrating. What do you want here? In our universe? The Emperor returned to his seat, composure restored. Initially, to return home. My Imperium needs me, regardless of whether I approve of what it's become. But he gestured at the Earth visible through the viewport. Your humanity is different, softer. They have protectors who ask nothing in return, who champion individual rights over collective survival. He searched for the word. Quaint and possibly doomed, but I admit I'm curious whether it can endure. We've endured invasions, reality warping, and cosmic threats, Wonder Woman said. We'll endure you. The Emperor smiled, and it was the saddest expression Superman had ever seen on a face that powerful. That remains to be seen, Princess, because every threat you faced had clear parameters. Defeat the villain, save the day, restore the status quo. But I'm not a villain. I'm an ideology made flesh. And ideas are far harder to defeat than monsters. Before anyone could respond, alarms shrieked through the watchtower. Cyborg's voice burst over every speaker. Boom, tube activity. Massive signature, apocalypse origin. Multiple signatures converging on our position. The Emperor stood, and golden light began to gather around his hands. It seems we have company. Your universe has its own tyrants, I see. How nostalgic. Superman and Wonder Woman exchanged a glance. Then Superman made a command decision. You want to prove you're not our enemy? Help us. The Emperor considered this, then nodded once. Very well. Consider this a demonstration of what I can offer your world, and what it would cost to refuse me. He strode toward the door, and it opened before he reached it, the electronic locks releasing as if his will alone commanded them. The Justice League scrambled to follow, none of them certain whether they'd just gained an ally or simply postponed a reckoning. In the cold void outside the watchtower, reality tore open, and Darkseid's parademons came screaming through. The void erupted with violence. Parademons swarmed through the boom tube like locusts, their shrieks cutting through the vacuum in ways that defied physics. Hundreds of them, cybernetically enhanced and bred for slaughter, converged on the watchtower with singular purpose. Behind them, larger signatures emerged, Kalabak's massive frame, the female furies in their battle formation, and at the rear, radiating power that made the stars themselves seem to dim. Darkseid. The Justice League responded with practiced precision. Green Lantern erected barriers while Flash evacuated non-combat personnel. Wonder Woman launched herself into the swarm, her sword singing through chitin and metal. Superman rocketed forward to intercept Kalabak. Batman coordinated from tactical, already analyzing attack patterns and vulnerability points. And the Emperor simply walked through the Watchtower's airlock into open space. No suit, no life support, no visible protection against the radiation, temperature extremes, or absence of atmosphere. He stood in the void as casually as a man taking an evening stroll, his armor gleaming gold, his expression one of mild interest. A parademon lunged at him, claws extended, fangs dripping acidic saliva. The Emperor raised one hand. The parademon unraveled. Not exploded, not torn apart. It ceased to be in a way that made observers' eyes water. Its matter didn't scatter. It simply stopped existing, converted to energy that the Emperor absorbed with the casual efficiency of breathing. 20 more parademons met the same fate in the span of a heartbeat, their deaths so swift and absolute that their screams cut off before they began. Apocalyptian shock troops, the Emperor observed. His voice transmitted psychically to every conscious mind in the battle. Cloned soldiers lobotomized and cybernetically enslaved. Efficient, if brutish. Your enemy understands the value of disposable assets. He moved through the swarm like a golden scythe through wheat. Where his hands passed, parademons died. Where his mind focused, their cybernetics fried, and their biological functions simply stopped. It wasn't combat. It was extermination with surgical precision. Green Lantern, still holding his barrier construct, found himself staring in horror and awe. He's killing them, Hal breathed over the comm. They're already dead, the Emperor replied, somehow hearing the transmission. Their higher brain functions were removed during processing. They're organic automatons. Destroying them is no more murder than deactivating a toaster. Wonder Woman cleaved through 3 parademons, then spared a glance toward the Emperor. His methodology was disturbingly familiar. The Amazons had fought wars of annihilation against impossible odds. She recognized the efficiency, the complete absence of hesitation or mercy. This was a being who had made peace with necessary evil millennia ago. Then Darkseid's voice boomed across the battlefield, resonating with the power of the Omega Effect itself. Cease. The parademons retreated instantly, forming ranks behind their master. The female Furies held position, weapons ready but not advancing. Kalabak snarled but obeyed, nursing the crater Superman had punched in his chest plate. And Darkseid himself floated forward, his massive form a monument to tyranny made flesh. The Lord of Apocalypse studied the Emperor with eyes that glowed red with barely contained power. You are not of this universe. Your energy signature is foreign, alien even to alien standards. The Emperor met his gaze without flinching. And you are a petty despot wearing godhood like an ill-fitting costume. I've fought entities that would reduce you to your constituent atoms with a thought. You don't frighten me, creature. Superman tensed, ready to intervene if violence erupted. Batman's tactical analysis scrolled warnings across his HUD. Wonder Woman shifted her stance, calculating attack vectors. But Darkseid did something unexpected. He smiled. I was not attempting to frighten you. I was evaluating you. Darkseid clasped his hands behind his back, the gesture somehow more threatening than any battle stance. You slaughtered my parademons with contempt, not hatred. You view them as tools unworthy of consideration. You carry yourself with the absolute certainty of one who has ruled for eons, not merely decades or centuries. And your power, his eyes narrowed, your power is psychic in nature, yet unconnected to any known psionic network in this reality. You are a conqueror, are you not? I am humanity's protector, the Emperor corrected. Conquest is merely the most efficient method of protection. Semantics. Darkseid gestured at the assembled Justice League. These so-called heroes operate under the delusion that morality and power can coexist without compromise. They believe in justice as if it were something more than the privilege of the strong to impose their will on the weak. But you and I, we understand reality. We understand that true peace requires absolute order, and absolute order requires absolute power. The Emperor's expression remained neutral, but everyone watching felt the psychic temperature in the space around them shift. You claim to understand power, yet you chase a mathematical equation, the anti-life equation, as if possession of a formula could substitute for actual dominion. You're a tyrant who's forgotten why tyranny exists. I rule because humanity requires guidance to survive. You rule because you crave validation for your existence. We are not the same. Darkseid's smile vanished. The Omega Sanction began to build in his eyes, reality-warping energy that could erase beings from existence. You dare. I dare because I've faced worse than you across 10,000 years of warfare. The Emperor's psychic presence expanded like a supernova, and suddenly every being in the vicinity felt the weight of his true power, not his physical form, but the consciousness behind it, vast and ancient and utterly implacable. I've stared into the eyes of chaos gods that feed on entire galaxies worth of suffering. I've bargained with entities that exist outside time itself. I've waged war against machines that devoured stars for fuel. You're a local warlord with delusions of grandeur. The Omega Sanction fired. Twin beams of reality annihilation lanced across space, powerful enough to erase Superman from existence, powerful enough to kill gods. They struck the Emperor dead center and stopped. The beams impacted an invisible barrier 6 inches from his chest, their reality-warping energy dispersing against a psychic shield that operated on principles Darkseid's technology couldn't comprehend. The Emperor didn't even flinch. He simply raised one hand, and golden energy gathered in his palm. Not magic, not technology, but raw psychic force, given terrible form. "My turn," he said quietly. The psychic blast that followed was precise, targeted, and devastating. It bypassed Darkseid's armor, bypassed his new god physiology, and struck directly at his consciousness. For a single, eternal moment, the Lord of Apocalypse experienced something he'd not felt in millennia. Pain, not physical pain, that he'd endured countless times. This was the agony of having one's mind invaded, dissected, and found wanting by an intelligence that dwarfed his own. Darkseid reeled backward, and the shock on his face would have been comical if it weren't so terrifying. The Emperor hadn't killed him. Killing would have been mercy. He'd simply demonstrated the gulf between them. "You wanted my attention," the Emperor said, lowering his hand. "You have it. Now leave, before I decide that your particular brand of tyranny represents a threat to this universe's humanity. I don't tolerate competition." For a long moment, Darkseid said nothing. His eyes flickered between crimson rage and calculating assessment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to smile again. But this time, it was a smile of genuine interest, perhaps even respect. "We will speak again," Darkseid said. When you grow weary of playing hero with these idealists, when you remember what true power demands, Apocalypse will offer you what this universe cannot. Purpose without pretense. Rule without apology. He turned toward his boom tube. Until then, Emperor of a dead empire, consider this an invitation to recognize your true nature. The boom tube swallowed Darkseid, his furies, and the remaining parademons. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the hum of the watchtower's systems and the quiet breathing of shocked heroes. Superman floated beside the Emperor, his expression unreadable. You could have killed him. Yes. Why didn't you? The Emperor turned those ancient eyes on Superman, and for a moment, the Kryptonian saw something unexpected: weariness. Because killing tyrants creates power vacuums, and nature abhors a vacuum. Better the devil you know than the chaos that follows. Besides, he glanced back at Earth, floating serene and blue in the distance. I wanted to see what you would do, whether you'd let me kill him. You didn't intervene, which means some part of you understands that morality is a luxury afforded by sufficient power. Or, Superman said coldly, it means I trusted you not to prove Darkseid right about what you are. The Emperor smiled, and it was the saddest expression imaginable. Then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed, Superman, because sooner or later, everyone proves Darkseid right. That's the real horror of his philosophy. Not that it's strong, but that it's correct more often than heroes want to admit. He walked back toward the airlock, leaving the Justice League to contemplate whether they'd just gained a powerful ally or simply delayed confronting their most dangerous enemy yet. Lex Luthor prided himself on being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. While the world panicked over Darkseid's brief assault on the Watchtower and the mysterious Golden Warrior who'd repelled him, Lex had already compiled a comprehensive dossier. Satellite footage, spectrographic analysis of the energy signatures, LexCorp's quantum computers running probability matrices on the stranger's origin, and most importantly, observations of how Superman looked at the Emperor, with the wary tension of someone who'd recognized a mirror he didn't like. So when his private communication array lit up with an incoming transmission from the Watchtower, Lex wasn't surprised. What surprised him was that the Emperor himself was making the call, not the Justice League's official channels. The holographic projection materialized in Lex's Metropolis penthouse, showing the Emperor standing in what appeared to be an observation deck, Earth rotating peacefully behind him. Those ancient eyes studied Lex with the same analytical intensity Lex usually reserved for others. Lex Luthor, the Emperor said without preamble. Industrialist, inventor, criminal, visionary. Baseline human with an IQ that places you among the top 0.01% of your species. You've built an empire on the premise that humanity doesn't need alien saviors, that human ingenuity and will can solve any problem. He paused. You're correct, of course, and you're wasting your potential on petty jealousy. Lex's expression didn't change, but his pulse quickened. I don't recall inviting surveillance or philosophical critique. You didn't need to. Your broadcasts are public. Your corporate holdings are matter of record. Your hatred of Superman bleeds through every interview, every press release, every technology demonstration designed to prove humanity's independence. The Emperor stepped closer to the projection field, and somehow the distance between them felt like it had collapsed. You see an alien pretending to be human, receiving worship and adulation for accidents of birth rather than achievements of merit. It offends you. It should. Lex leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Flattery is beneath you, I suspect. What do you want? An exchange of resources and knowledge. You possess technological infrastructure, political connections, and intimate understanding of this Earth's geopolitical landscape. I possess scientific knowledge from 40,000 years of human advancement, engineering principles that would revolutionize your civilization within a generation, and practical experience building interstellar empires. The Emperor's smile was thin and calculating. We could accelerate humanity's development by centuries, render them independent of meta-human protection, give them the tools to stand as equals among the cosmic powers that treat this planet as a playground. It was everything Lex had ever wanted, offered on a silver platter by a being who just humiliated Darkseid. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. But every analytical cell in Lex's brain whispered that traps only work if you're not smart enough to see them coming. And in return? Lex asked carefully. Resources to construct the technology necessary for interdimensional travel. I intend to return to my universe, and I'll need exotic materials, fabrication facilities, and computational power beyond what your current infrastructure provides. The Emperor gestured, and holographic schematics bloomed in the air. Designs for devices that made LexCorp's most advanced projects look like stone tools. Consider it an exchange between two pragmatists who understand that sentiment is the enemy of progress. Lex stood, walking to his window overlooking Metropolis. Below, millions of people went about their lives, blissfully unaware that two would-be architects of human destiny were negotiating their future. The Justice League won't approve. Superman certainly won't. The Justice League doesn't control you. Superman doesn't own your loyalty. And neither of them possess the moral authority to dictate humanity's evolutionary path. The Emperor's voice carried absolute conviction. They're guardians, Luthor. Well-intentioned, perhaps, but ultimately convinced that humanity is something to be protected rather than elevated. You and I know better. Humanity is something to be unleashed. Lex turned back to the hologram. You killed Darkseid's parademons without hesitation. Efficient, clean. No speeches about redemption or second chances. How many have you killed in pursuit of your vision? Billions, the Emperor said without hesitation or shame. Possibly trillions, if you count sanctioned planetary exterminations. Every death weighed, calculated, and deemed necessary for humanity's survival. I don't claim moral superiority, Luthor. I claim superior results. My Imperium endured where countless other civilizations collapsed into extinction or worse. The price was steep, but the alternative was oblivion. And you expect me to believe you'd share that knowledge without strings attached? Without turning this Earth into another vassal state in your empire? The Emperor's laugh was harsh and genuine. I have no empire here. My Imperium exists in another universe, if it still exists at all. What would I gain from conquering a single planet in a reality I intend to leave? No. I offer this because it amuses me to see what your humanity could become without the crutch of meta-human saviors. Call it scientific curiosity. Call it boredom. Call it whatever allows you to accept the opportunity. Lex's mind raced through scenarios, probabilities, potential outcomes. The Emperor was dangerous, that was obvious. But he was also offering genuine technological advancement, not the usual villain's promise of power corrupted by megalomania or alien influence. This was cold, calculated investment in human potential by something that understood human potential intimately. I'll need proof of concept, Lex said. Something small, demonstrable. If your knowledge is as advanced as you claim, prove it. The Emperor nodded as if he'd expected this. Fair. 3 days. I'll transmit schematics for a compact fusion reactor operating at 98% efficiency. No radioactive waste, no risk of meltdown. Output sufficient to power a city the size of Metropolis indefinitely. Build it using your existing facilities. If it works, we proceed. If it doesn't, you lose nothing but time. And if it works, what's your first request? Access to your satellite network and quantum computing array. I need to locate specific exotic particles that exist only in regions of intense gravitational distortion, near black holes, neutron stars, places your species has only observed from a distance. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with the hunger of a scientist chasing a theory. I'll also require samples of nth metal, if you can acquire it. Its properties suggest dimensional resonance characteristics that could stabilize the rift I need to create. Lex calculated quickly. Satellite access was monitorable, controllable. Exotic particle data was useless to most people anyway. And nth metal, well, Thanagarian artifacts occasionally appeared on the black market. Nothing he was offering the Emperor would immediately threaten Earth or give the being leverage over human civilization. One condition, Lex said. Whatever technology you provide gets licensed through LexCorp. Humanity gets the benefits, but through proper economic channels. No destabilizing the global economy with free energy overnight. The Emperor actually looked approving. Sensible. Uncontrolled technological distribution causes social collapse as often as it causes prosperity. Your species needs time to adapt, to integrate advances gradually. I have no interest in triggering civilizational chaos. He extended one hand, even though they were separated by holographic projection and hundreds of miles. Do we have an accord? Lex hesitated. Every partnership he'd ever formed had ended in betrayal, his own, usually. The Emperor was more dangerous than any collaborator he'd worked with before. But the potential. He reached out and pressed his palm against the holographic representation of the Emperor's hand. We have an accord, 3 days. If your fusion reactor works, we proceed carefully and with clear boundaries. Agreed. The Emperor's smile was that of a chess player who'd just secured a critical piece. I'll transmit the specifications within the hour. Build it, test it, and try not to look too shocked when it performs exactly as promised. The hologram flickered out, leaving Lex alone with his thoughts and the terrifying recognition that he'd just entered a partnership with something that made his own ambitions look quaint by comparison. The question wasn't whether the Emperor's technology would work. Lex's instincts told him it absolutely would. The question was whether he was clever enough to use the Emperor's knowledge without becoming a pawn in whatever larger game was being played. His computer chimed. The schematics had already arrived, dense with mathematical principles and engineering solutions that made his breath catch. It was real. It was revolutionary. And it was exactly what Lex Luthor had been waiting his entire life to obtain. He pulled up his private communication line to LexCorp's Advanced Projects Division. Clear Lab 7, Priority Alpha. We're building something that's going to change the world. Below, Metropolis glittered in the evening light, unaware that 2 men, one human, one transhuman god, had just agreed to reshape humanity's destiny. Superman would object. Batman would investigate. The Justice League would mobilize. But Lex Luthor had never let other people's objections stop him before. And he wasn't about to start now. The House of Mystery manifested in London's fog-shrouded streets, its doorway appearing exactly where John Constantine needed it, which was to say, exactly where he least wanted to be. The chain-smoking mage had been nursing whiskey in a Liverpool dive bar when the psychic pressure started building behind his eyes like a migraine made of screaming ghosts. Something catastrophically wrong had entered Earth's magical ecosystem, and every sensitive from here to Hong Kong felt it. Constantine pushed open the door to find he wasn't the first to arrive. Zatanna stood near the central table, her stage magician aesthetic looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced protective sigils in the air. Muscle memory, nervous energy, the actions of someone who'd felt something that shook her faith in her own power. Dr. Fate hovered near the far wall, his golden helm gleaming with agitated mystical energy. Even Etrigan was present, the demon bound in Jason Blood's body prowling the perimeter like a caged predator. Right then, Constantine lit a cigarette despite Zatanna's glare. Who wants to explain why reality's magical foundation just got kicked in the bollocks? The being from the watchtower. Dr. Fate's voice resonated with multiple harmonics, Nabu speaking through his host. The one called Emperor. He is not merely extra-universal. He is antithetical to magic as we understand it. Zatanna nodded, pulling up holographic footage of the Emperor's battle with Darkseid. Watch this carefully. She slowed the playback to the moment the Emperor killed the parademons. See how they just stop? No explosion, no visible wound. I ran spectral analysis on the energy signature. Her fingers danced through mystical diagnostic formulas. He's not using magic. He's using psychic force so refined, so concentrated, that it warps local reality. It looks like magic, but it's actually weaponized willpower. Constantine finished, his expression darkening. Bloody hell. He's doing what the Green Lanterns do, but without the emotional spectrum dependency. Pure consciousness imposing order on chaos. It gets worse. Zatanna pulled up another image, the moment the Emperor blocked Darkseid's Omega sanction. That should have killed him. The Omega effect rewrites existence at a fundamental level. But watch, the beams don't penetrate. They don't deflect. They just dissipate. Like reality itself forgot what they were supposed to do. Dr. Fate floated closer to the projection. He creates zones of absolute psychic dominion. Within his sphere of influence, his will becomes the primary organizing principle of reality. Magic draws on external forces, the lords of order and chaos, divine beings, primal energies. His power draws only on himself. He is a closed system that rejects outside influence. Constantine took a long drag, processing. So he's walking null magic field with the psychic might to back it up. That's actually impressive and terrifying. Because if he decides magic is a threat to his version of order, he could unmake us as easily as he unmade those parademons. Zatanna finished quietly. Etrigan growled, his demonic voice scraping against the room's wards. This golden fool thinks himself supreme. Yet hell has faced such gods before, it seems. His mind is vast, his power bright, but Etrigan has tasted greater fright. You've encountered something like him? Constantine asked. The demon's eyes glowed crimson. In wars before your ages came, when reality was young and flame, gods who thought their will was all, learned, even gods can fall. Before anyone could press further, the House of Mystery shuddered. Not physically. The walls remained solid. But the metaphysical foundation trembled as something impossibly vast pressed against the building's reality-warping defenses. The protective wards Constantine had reinforced for decades blazed to life, screaming psychic alarms. And then the Emperor simply stepped through the wall, not teleported, not phased. He walked through solid matter as if it had courteously decided to stop existing in his path. The House of Mystery's defenses, designed to repel entities up to and including lesser gods, parted for him like water around a stone. "Your wards are impressive," the Emperor said conversationally, studying the glowing sigils with genuine interest. Layered protection drawing on multiple mystical traditions. Sumerian binding formulae, Atlantean geometric principles, what appears to be demonic pact enforcement. "You've woven quite the security blanket, Constantine." Constantine didn't drop his cigarette, but it was a near thing. "You shouldn't be able to enter here. This place exists partially outside normal reality. The house chooses who enters. And it chose to let me in, rather than be destroyed." The Emperor's gaze swept the room, cataloging each occupant with clinical precision. The stage magician channels raw magical force through verbal frameworks, impressive versatility, but vulnerable to silence. The demon is a bound entity, controlled through ancient compact and host body limitations. And the Lord of Order. He focused on Dr. Fate, and Nabu's presence flared defensively. "You're not human at all. Just a consciousness wearing meat like a suit. Fascinating." Dr. Fate's voice carried an edge of anger rare for the usually composed entity. "You violate sacred space. The House of Mystery has stood inviolate for millennia. Nothing is inviolate to sufficient force." The Emperor's tone wasn't boastful, merely factual. "Your mystical protections operate on the principle that magic creates rules reality must follow. My psychic dominion operates on the principle that consciousness precedes all rules. When those principles conflict, consciousness wins. It's simply hierarchy of causation." Zatanna stepped forward, her hands beginning to weave a spell. "You're saying magic isn't real?" "I'm saying magic is real, but derivative. Consciousness creates reality. Reality generates physical laws. Those laws create conditions for energy manipulation. Magic harnesses those energies through symbolic frameworks and external bargains." The Emperor's eyes glowed faintly golden. "I skip the intermediary steps. My will shapes reality directly because I understand what I am. A quantum phenomenon that insists on its own coherence across 40,000 years. Magic users are powerful, but they're asking reality for permission. I don't ask." Constantine laughed, sharp, bitter, a sound that had seen too many apocalypses. "Bloody hell, you're not a conqueror. You're a solipsist with actual power to back it up. You genuinely believe the universe bends to your will because you've spent 40 millennia making it true." The Emperor's slight smile confirmed it. Belief and reality converge, given sufficient time and power. Why do you think your gods exist? Sufficient worship literally creates divinity in your magical framework. I'm simply divine without requiring the worship. Arrogant words. Etrigan snarled, flames licking from his jaws. Accurate words, the Emperor corrected. But I didn't come here to debate metaphysics. I came because you're analyzing me, trying to determine if I'm a threat to Earth's magical ecosystem. I am, but not in the way you fear. The magical practitioners exchanged glances. Constantine spoke carefully. Go on then. Explain why we shouldn't bind you right now and toss you back through whatever hole you crawled out of. Because you can't, the Emperor said simply. And because I'm going to offer you something more valuable than my removal. Understanding. He gestured, and golden light coalesced into a three-dimensional representation of two universes. His and DC's. Their metaphysical structures laid bare. Your universe is young and flexible. Magic, divine power, emotional spectrum energies, speed force. You have multiple competing systems of power that coexist because reality here hasn't ossified into rigid laws. My universe is old and dying. The warp, our dimension of psychic energy, has been corrupted by 40,000 years of suffering, hatred, and war. It's hell, literally. 4 gods of pure malevolence feed on negative emotions and seek to corrupt all conscious life. Zatanna studied the representation, her expression shifting from hostile to horrified. You're saying your universe's version of magic is actively evil? Worse than evil. It's hungry. And I've spent 10,000 years holding it back, preventing it from devouring humanity completely. The Emperor's ancient eyes met each of theirs in turn. I didn't come to your universe by choice, but while I'm here, I've noticed something fascinating. Your magical ecosystem is balanced. Order and chaos, good and evil, light and dark. They maintain equilibrium. It's fragile, imperfect, but functional. And you want to study it, Dr. Fate said, understanding dawning. To learn how to fix your own universe. If I can return, the Emperor confirmed. Your magical framework represents possibilities mine has lost. Constantine's binding contracts, Zatanna's verbal magic, your order chaos dynamic. These are solutions to problems my reality can no longer solve. He paused, and something raw entered his voice. My Imperium is built on suppression of psychic potential because unleashing it means chaos corruption. But if I could introduce principles from your magical framework, you could give your people their power back without damnation. Constantine finished, genuinely stunned. Bloody hell, you actually care about them. They're my species, the Emperor said quietly. My responsibility, my burden. And if there's even a chance to lift that burden, to give humanity its birthright without condemning them to eternal torment. His hands clenched into fists. I will pursue that chance regardless of cost. The House of Mystery fell silent, except for the crackling of Etrigan's flames. Finally, Zatanna spoke. What do you need from us? Access to the Rock of Eternity. Detailed documentation of how your magical contracts remain stable despite contradictory power sources. And he looked at Constantine specifically. Knowledge of how a baseline human can bind entities vastly more powerful than himself through nothing but will and clever wording. Constantine barked another laugh. You want to learn con man tricks from Earth's magical screw-up? I want to learn how to make deals with devils without becoming one, the Emperor corrected. Something you've managed for decades despite every incentive to fail. That's not luck, Constantine. That's skill. And I require that skill. Dr. Fate's voice carried Nabu's full authority. If we aid you, and you return to your universe, what happens to this Earth? Nothing. I have no claim here, no subjects to rule, no empire to extend. Your Earth continues exactly as it would without my presence. The Emperor's expression hardened. But refuse me, and I'll pursue my research regardless. I'm offering cooperation because it's efficient. Don't mistake efficiency for necessity. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but absolute. Constantine looked at Zatanna, who looked at Dr. Fate, who looked at Etrigan. A silent conversation passed between them, carried on magical frequencies and shared terror. All right, Constantine said finally. We help you, but under conditions. No unmaking people who annoy you. No imposing your psychic dominion over population centers. And if we decide you've crossed a line, you'll attempt to stop me, fail, and force me to demonstrate why cooperation was the wiser choice. The Emperor finished. Understood. But for what it's worth, Constantine, I have no interest in ruling your Earth. I simply want to save mine. For a being who just violated their strongest sanctum and casually threatened them, the sincerity in that statement was somehow more disturbing than any threat could have been. Amanda Waller didn't frighten easily. You couldn't run Task Force X, the Suicide Squad, without developing an immunity to fear. She'd blackmailed metahumans, negotiated with demons, and stared down alien invasions with nothing but contingency plans and unshakable resolve. But when she watched the satellite footage of the Emperor walking through the House of Mystery's defenses like they were mist, she felt something uncomfortably close to concern. Not fear. Amanda Waller didn't do fear. But concern was justified when a being capable of humiliating Darkseid and bypassing Earth's strongest magical protections was currently unaligned with any governmental authority. She made the call from Belle Reeve's most secure bunker, routing through 6 proxy servers and 3 separate encryption protocols. The Emperor answered before the first ring completed. Director Waller. His voice carried that unsettling quality of someone who'd known she'd call before she decided to. I was wondering when the United States government would make official contact. 17 hours since my arrival. Slower response than I anticipated. But I suppose bureaucracy transcends universes. Amanda's expression didn't flicker. You violated international airspace, engaged in combat without authorization, collaborated with a known terrorist. Lex Luthor is many things, but terrorist is inaccurate. Industrialist with flexible ethics is more precise. The Emperor's holographic projection appeared in her office, uninvited, his systems having casually penetrated Belle Reeve's security. And let's dispense with the posturing, Director. You didn't call to lecture me on airspace violations. You called because you want to determine whether I'm an asset or a threat, and more importantly, whether I can be controlled. Amanda leaned back in her chair, reassessing. Direct approach, then. Can you be controlled? No. The answer was immediate and absolute. But I can be negotiated with, if the terms are reasonable and align with my objectives. That's why you're valuable, Director. Unlike the Justice League with their moral absolutism, or Luthor with his ego-driven agenda, you understand pragmatism. You make hard choices for practical outcomes. Flattery noted. What do you want? The Emperor's projection walked to her window, an affectation since he wasn't physically present, but the gesture felt deliberate. Your intelligence networks, specifically your satellite surveillance of deep space phenomena, classified research into dimensional barriers, and access to certain metahuman assets currently under your control. Amanda's fingers didn't move toward the panic button, but she calculated its distance. In exchange for? Military applications of technology from my universe. Nothing world-ending. I have no interest in destabilizing your planet's power balance. But improvements to personal armor, enhanced targeting systems, battlefield medical technology that could save thousands of soldiers' lives. Practical applications that strengthen your country's defensive capabilities without triggering arms races or giving you overwhelming offensive advantage. It was a good offer. Too good. What's the catch? The catch is that accepting my help means acknowledging that your government's metahuman policy is fundamentally flawed. The Emperor's eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. Task Force X is brilliant in concept, leveraging dangerous assets for deniable operations. But it's built on coercion and explosive leashes. You control through fear of death, which works until you encounter someone who doesn't fear death. What you need is a framework for genuine loyalty. Amanda's jaw tightened. My people are criminals. They don't deserve trust. Perhaps. But have you considered that treating them as disposable might be creating the very disloyalty you're trying to prevent? The Emperor gestured, and holographic files appeared, detailed psychological profiles of Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and others. Floyd Lawton possesses genuine tactical brilliance and a code of ethics, however twisted. Harley Quinn demonstrates adaptive problem-solving under pressure. Even Captain Boomerang is an idiot who'd sell out his own mother for beer money, Amanda interrupted. True, but an idiot who wants to matter. They all do. That's the real control mechanism you're missing, Director. Purpose. The Emperor's expression was that of a teacher presenting a disappointing student with their fundamental error. I created 20 superhuman generals. Half of them betrayed me, not because I was cruel, but because I failed to give them purpose beyond conquest. I learned, eventually, that even weapons need meaning. Your squad has skills. Give them meaning beyond survival, and you'll have an army instead of a chain gang. Amanda processed this. Running scenarios. You're suggesting ideological reform of the Suicide Squad. That's not my mandate. Then expand your mandate. You already operate in legal gray areas. What's one more boundary crossed if it makes your assets more effective? The Emperor leaned forward, and his psychic presence pressed against the room's edges. I'll sweeten the offer. I'll personally screen your current and potential assets. Psychic analysis. No invasive mental manipulation, just assessment. I'll tell you who's genuinely redeemable, who's controllable, and who needs to be permanently contained, free of charge. It was manipulation, obviously. But it was also exactly what Amanda needed and didn't have the resources to obtain. And what do you get from making Task Force X more effective? Proof of concept, the Emperor said simply. If I can help you transform criminals into functional soldiers through purpose rather than punishment, it validates theories I need tested before I return to my universe. Consider it field research with practical benefits for both parties. Amanda stood, walking to her own window overlooking Belle Rave's exercise yard. Below, meta-human prisoners moved through their routines, each one a potential asset or catastrophic liability. You said you needed access to meta-human assets. Be specific. I want to interview 3 individuals currently under your supervision: Killer Croc, Bane, and Livewire. The Emperor's list was oddly specific. Croc represents mutation-based enhancement, relevant to my research on biological adaptation. Bane demonstrates the limits of chemical augmentation and will-driven performance. Livewire is pure energy conversion, consciousness transmuted into electromagnetic force. Each represents a different pathway of human evolution. You want to study how humans can transcend their limitations, Amanda translated. I want to understand how your universe's humans evolve compared to mine. My Imperium relies on genetic engineering and psychic conditioning. Your world produces metahumans through accidents, mutations, and voluntary transformation. The philosophical difference is profound. I force evolution. Your universe allows it to emerge organically. I need to understand if organic emergence produces better results. Amanda made her decision. You get supervised access to those 3. 1 hour each, monitored, with kill switches active. You provide the psychological assessments of my entire squad roster. And you give me 1 piece of technology immediately. Something I can field test before committing to deeper collaboration. The Emperor smiled, and for once it seemed genuine. Acceptable. The technology will be schematics for personal shield generators, wrist-mounted, powered by kinetic energy absorption, capable of stopping small arms fire and reducing explosive impacts by 60%. Build a dozen, Field test them on your next squad deployment. If they save lives, we proceed. And if they malfunction, they won't. I don't offer defective technology, Director. It's beneath me. His arrogance wasn't bluster. It was simple confidence backed by 40,000 years of technological advancement. But if you're concerned, test them on volunteers first. I'm patient. Amanda extended her hand toward the hologram. A symbolic gesture since they couldn't physically touch. We have an arrangement. Conditional, monitored, and contingent on you not killing anyone on American soil without authorization. I'll try to restrain myself, the Emperor said dryly, though I make no promises if Darkseid returns. Self-defense remains non-negotiable. The hologram flickered out, leaving Amanda alone with her thoughts and the uncomfortable recognition that she just made a deal with something that might be more dangerous than anything currently contained in Bel Rev. But danger was a tool, and Amanda Waller had built a career on wielding dangerous tools for productive ends. She opened her secure line to the containment wing. Prepare interview rooms for special access. High-value consultant incoming. Triple security protocols. And I want psychic dampeners active even if he claims they're unnecessary. Her second-in-command's voice crackled back. Ma'am, is this about the alien from the Watchtower incident? He's not an alien. He's human. That's what makes him dangerous. Amanda pulled up the Emperor's file on her screen, studying the being who claimed to have guided humanity for 40 millennia. Aliens we can predict. But a human who's had 40,000 years to perfect the art of controlling other humans? That's a threat vector we've never encountered. Should we alert the Justice League? Amanda considered, then dismissed it. No, they're too busy debating ethics to make hard choices. This stays compartmentalized until we have actionable intelligence. She watched the satellite feed of the Watchtower, where she knew the Emperor was currently residing as the Justice League's reluctant guest. Superman would be watching him, probably arguing philosophy and trying to find common ground. Batman would be planning contingencies. Wonder Woman would be assessing whether he qualified as a warrior or tyrant. But none of them would think to offer him what he actually needed: purpose beyond his own universe. That was Amanda Waller's gift, recognizing what people wanted versus what they needed, and leveraging the gap between them. The Emperor wanted to return home and save his civilization. But what he needed was validation that his 40,000 years of ruthless pragmatism had been worth the cost. And if Amanda could provide that validation while extracting useful technology and intelligence for Earth's defense, that was just good business. She pulled up the files on Killer Croc, Bane, and Livewire, making notes on what questions to prohibit, what information to withhold, and what observations to monitor. The Emperor would learn from them, certainly, but Amanda would learn from watching him learn. Every question he asked would reveal his priorities. Every reaction would expose his psychology. By the time he finished his interviews, Amanda Waller would know exactly what kind of threat or asset the Emperor of mankind represented. And more importantly, she'd know how to control him, even if he believed himself uncontrollable. Because that was another thing Amanda Waller understood that the Justice League didn't. Everyone could be controlled. You just had to find the right leverage point. For the Emperor, that leverage point was humanity itself. He'd spent 40,000 years protecting his species, making impossible choices, bearing unimaginable burdens. That kind of dedication wasn't easily abandoned, which meant it could be exploited. She began drafting a secondary proposal, something she wouldn't present immediately, but would hold in reserve for when the Emperor's stay extended beyond his initial expectations. Something involving Earth's humanity, threats they faced, and how an entity with 40,000 years of experience protecting his species might feel obligated to protect theirs. Not control through force, control through obligation. The Emperor was pragmatic, but he was also sincere about his species' protection. Make Earth's humanity his responsibility, even temporarily, and he'd defend them with the same ruthless efficiency he'd employed across 40,000 years. It was manipulative. It was cold. It was exactly the kind of chess move that made Amanda Waller both invaluable and deeply unsettling to work with. And it would absolutely work. The silence on Apocalypse was always pregnant with violence. In the throne room carved from obsidian and suffering, Darkseid sat motionless, his eyes glowing crimson as he reviewed holographic data streams from 1,000 conquered worlds. But his mind was elsewhere, circling the problem of the Emperor like a predator assessing unexpected prey. The Golden Warrior had humiliated him, not defeated. Darkseid had been defeated before, temporarily, by Superman and others. But humiliation was different. The Emperor had made him feel pain, psychic agony that bypassed his new god physiology entirely. Worse, he dismissed Darkseid's philosophy as derivative, his power as insufficient, his very existence as quaint. No one had dared such contempt in millennia. Granny Goodness approached the throne, her grotesque frame moving with predatory grace. My lord, the deep space probes have completed their analysis of the dimensional breach. The readings are unusual. Define unusual, Darkseid commanded, his voice grinding like continental plates. The breach doesn't originate from any known universe in our local multiverse cluster. The energy signature suggests an entirely separate cosmological structure. Different fundamental forces, altered quantum mechanics, a reality where consciousness interacts with physical law in ways our physics can't model. Granny pulled up the readings, and even she looked disturbed. My lord, his universe is old. Entropic decay signatures suggest it's approaching heat death. Whatever civilization he built, it's been fighting universal extinction for thousands of years. Darkseid absorbed this, his tactical mind reassessing. The Emperor wasn't merely powerful, he was desperate. A being from a dying universe, struggling to save a species circling the drain of cosmic entropy. That desperation was leverage, if applied correctly. What else? Darkseid knew his servant was holding back. We detected fragments of his psychic broadcasts when he killed the parademons. The data was educational. Granny hesitated, which she rarely did. He's killed trillions, my lord. His mind carries the psychic weight of genocides that dwarf anything in recorded history. Entire species exterminated. Planets reduced to lifeless rock. Civilizations burned not out of malice, but cold calculation. He's committed atrocities that would make even Apocalypse hesitate. Yet, he works with this universe's heroes, Darkseid mused. Superman, the Justice League. He negotiates with Earth's governments and magical practitioners. Why? According to intercepted communications between their watchtower and Earth, he wants to return home. Everything he does here serves that singular goal. The technology exchanges, the magical research, even tolerating their primitive moral lectures. Granny's smile was vicious. He doesn't care about this universe, my lord. It's merely a way station. Darkseid stood, his massive frame seeming to expand in the dim light. Then we give him what he wants. Granny blinked, genuinely confused. My lord, the Emperor seeks to return to his universe. This requires technology, exotic materials, and deep understanding of interdimensional mechanics. Darkseid's eyes blazed brighter. Apocalypse possesses the most advanced boom tube technology in this galaxy. We have mapped dimensional pathways that Earth scientists don't know exist. We have access to resources from 1,000 conquered worlds. He turned to face his servant fully. We offer him a partnership. Apocalypse helps him return home, and in exchange, he gives us access to his universe. Granny breathed, understanding dawning. A reality dying of entropy, filled with desperate populations, advanced technology that operates on different physical principles. A new frontier for conquest. Darkseid's smile was terrible. His Imperium has survived 40,000 years in a hostile universe. Their military technology, their resilience, their desperation, all valuable. And if his universe is truly approaching heat death, its inhabitants will welcome any salvation, even from Apocalypse. His fist clenched. The Emperor thinks in terms of species survival. We think in terms of eternal dominion. His universe becomes our empire, and Earth, this Earth that has resisted me for so long, loses its most interesting new variable. Granny's expression shifted to something approaching admiration. You want to help him leave so you can follow him through and conquer his dying universe while simultaneously removing a threat from this one. Elegant, my lord. More than elegant, necessary. Darkseid returned to his throne, mind already calculating approaches, leverage points, presentation strategies. The Emperor is pragmatic, not sentimental. He cares nothing for this Earth beyond what it can offer him. We simply need to offer more than Luther's technology or Waller's intelligence networks. We offer him what he actually needs: immediate access to dimensional transport technology without the delay of building it from scratch. Will he trust us? He doesn't need to trust us. He needs to calculate that our offer provides optimal value. Darkseid's tactical genius was already assembling the perfect pitch. We present it as a transaction between equals. Two entities who understand that power without sentimentality is power multiplied. We acknowledge our previous confrontation as mutual assessment rather than hostility. We offered technical specifications of boom tube technology in exchange for information about his universe's unique physics. Then, when he opens the portal home, we send forces through before it closes, Granny finished. Establish a beachhead in his reality. Precisely. And if his Imperium is as embattled as his psychic signature suggests, they'll be too weak to resist Apocalypse's full might. We conquer a universe, gain access to 40,000 years of military innovation, and remove a potential rival from DC's reality simultaneously. Darkseid stood again, decision made. Prepare the diplomatic approach. I will speak with the Emperor personally, without hostility, offering the one thing his current allies cannot: speed. Luther can build him a portal in months. Waller can provide intelligence over weeks. The Justice League can offer nothing but obstacles. But Apocalypse can open the gateway home within days. And if he refuses? Darkseid's smile was patient, ancient, and utterly ruthless. Then we ensure his research fails, sabotage Luthor's facilities, redirect Waller's resources, convince the Justice League he's too dangerous to permit interdimensional travel, force him to choose between accepting our help or remaining stranded in this universe indefinitely. His eyes glowed with the certainty of a being who'd waged war across galaxies. He'll choose pragmatism over pride. They always do. Granny bowed, already mentally assembling the diplomatic package. I'll prepare technical specifications detailed enough to seem generous, but incomplete enough to require ongoing collaboration. When should we make contact? Soon, but not immediately. Darkseid pulled up holographic surveillance of the watchtower, where the Emperor was currently engaged in what appeared to be a philosophical debate with Superman. Let him grow frustrated with their moral preening first. Let Luthor's timeline extend as complications inevitably arise. Let Waller's intelligence prove less useful than promised. Let him experience the limitations of working with beings who value sentiment over results. He zoomed in on the Emperor's face, reading the subtle tells of a being whose patience was legendary, but not infinite. Then we offer salvation from their incompetence. The feed showed Superman gesturing emphatically, clearly arguing some ethical point, while the Emperor's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but increasingly distant. Anyone who'd spent 40,000 years navigating politics could recognize forced tolerance when they saw it. 3 days, Darkseid decided. In 3 days, his initial enthusiasm for collaboration will have soured into frustration. That's when we make our approach, when he's most receptive to alternatives, most aware that this universe's heroes are obstacles rather than allies. Granny departed to assemble the diplomatic mission, leaving Darkseid alone with his calculations. The Emperor of Mankind was dangerous, brilliant, and utterly committed to his species' survival. Those traits made him predictable, despite his power. A being who'd committed genocide for pragmatic reasons wouldn't hesitate to work with Apocalypse if it served his ultimate goal. And if the Emperor realized the trap before it closed? If his 40,000-year-old intellect calculated Darkseid's true intentions? Then it would be a war between two beings who'd perfected the art of ruthless necessity. And Darkseid, sitting in his throne room built from the suffering of conquered worlds, smiled at the prospect. Win or lose, it would be the most interesting conflict he'd waged in centuries. Far above, Earth spun peacefully in the void, unaware that two tyrants, one present, one from distant stars, were circling each other like sharks, each convinced they could manipulate the other, each certain their version of ruthless pragmatism would triumph. The Justice League monitored the Emperor, worried about his philosophy and power. Lex Luthor collaborated with him, excited about technological advancement. Amanda Waller assessed him, planning control mechanisms. Constantine and the magical community studied him, seeking understanding. But none of them were thinking like conquerors. None of them understood that the Emperor's greatest vulnerability wasn't his power or his psychology. It was his desperation to return home. And desperation, as Darkseid had learned across thousands of years, was always exploitable. He opened a communication channel to his elite tactical division. Begin preparations for interdimensional invasion. Target universe, designation unknown Epsilon. Expected resistance, extreme. Expected resources, vast. Authorization level, Darkseid Prime. The channel acknowledged and closed. Apocalypse began to move, its vast industrial capacity shifting toward a new objective. Dimensional probes launched into deep space, mapping potential breach points. Scientists who'd spent centuries perfecting boom tube technology received new priorities. Military divisions prepared for combat in an unknown reality with unknown physics. And at the center of it all, Darkseid sat on his throne and planned the conquest of a universe the Emperor of Mankind had spent 40,000 years protecting. Not out of malice, but out of the same ruthless pragmatism the Emperor himself would recognize and possibly respect. After all, in a cosmos where power determined survival, there was no room for sentimentality. The Emperor understood that. Darkseid understood that. The only question was which of them understood it better. The answer would determine the fate of two universes. The Watchtower's main observation deck was designed to inspire awe. with its panoramic view of Earth and the star-dusted void beyond. But tonight, the atmosphere was thick with tension, not wonder. Superman and the Emperor stood facing the stars, their conversation having long since passed the point of philosophical debate and into something far more fundamental. "You cannot seriously believe that," Superman said, his voice low but intense. "What you're describing isn't governance. It's slavery with extra steps. It is the only method that has proven effective across the staggering scale of time and space." The Emperor replied, his tone that of a scientist stating an immutable law. "Your justice is a reactive force. You wait for the fire to start, then you put it out. I prevent the arsonist from ever striking the match. My way saves more lives. At the cost of their freedom, at the cost of their right to choose, to make mistakes, to learn and grow." Superman turned from the viewport, his eyes blazing with blue fire. "You talk about humanity as if it's a child that never grows up, a resource to be managed. I see their potential. I have faith in them." "Faith is not a strategy," the Emperor countered, a flicker of genuine impatience in his ancient eyes. "I have witnessed what potential unleashes when left unchecked. I have seen the utopias birthed from your philosophy curdle into empires of blood and screaming madness. The warp, the dimension of psychic energy in my reality, feeds on that unchecked potential. It twists hope into obsession, love into possession, ambition into ravenous hunger. Your universe's balance is a fluke, a temporary calm before an inevitable storm you cannot possibly comprehend. So your solution is to chain them? To dictate their every thought, their every belief? My solution is to guide them past the point where such chains are necessary. I sought to lead humanity to a state of pure, enlightened rationality, free from the predation of gods and the follies of superstition. The Great Crusade was not about conquest for its own sake. It was about unification for survival. To scatter humanity is to let it be devoured piece by piece. To unite it is to give it a chance. He took a step towards Superman, and the air grew heavy. "You speak of freedom, but your freedom is an illusion. Your Earth is perpetually seconds from annihilation, saved only by the tireless efforts of a handful of extraordinary beings. What happens when you fail? What happens when you are not enough? My way ensures that humanity does not need to be saved. It ensures that humanity can save itself. By becoming you," Superman said, the words dripping with cold horror. "By becoming cold, calculating, and utterly merciless, you would burn away everything that makes them human. Compassion, empathy, love, and call it evolution. I would burn away the weaknesses that leave them vulnerable." The Emperor's voice rose for the first time, a crack of thunder in the enclosed space. "I have held the dying in my arms, children whose only crime was being born on a world that could not be saved. I have made choices that would shatter your moral certainty into a million pieces, not for power, not for glory, but so that one more generation might live to see a dawn without terror. You judge me from a position of luxury, Kryptonian. Your battles are clean, your victories are absolute. My war is eternal, and it is fought in the mud and the blood, where every choice is between a terrible option and a catastrophic one." The door hissed open, and Wonder Woman entered, her face a mask of grim resolve. She had been listening. "He is not entirely wrong, Clark." Both men turned to her. Superman looked betrayed. The Emperor looked intrigued. "Diana," Superman asked, "on Themyscira, we learned that not all cultures are ready for the freedoms others enjoy. We isolated ourselves for millennia, not because we hated the world of man, but because we knew its chaos and its passions could consume us. We chose order and discipline to preserve our way of life. She looked at the Emperor. But what you describe is not discipline. It is absolute subjugation. You speak of saving humanity from itself, but you have become the very monster you sought to protect them from. You have become a god demanding worship, a tyrant demanding obedience. I have become what is necessary, the Emperor stated, his composure returning, solidifying into something harder and colder than before. And this conversation has proven what I suspected. There is no common ground between your path and mine. You will always see me as a monster. I will always see you as a well-meaning child, playing with forces you refuse to understand. An alert flashed on the console. Batman's voice, tight and controlled, echoed through the comms. We have a problem. LexCorp's quantum research facility in Geneva just went dark. Total communications blackout. Energy signatures are off the scale. It's not an attack, it's something else. The Emperor's head tilted. Luthor has completed the preliminary dimensional resonator ahead of schedule. Ambitious. You gave him that technology? Superman's voice was dangerously quiet. I gave him the tools to help me leave. He is merely being efficient. The Emperor began walking toward the exit. This is precisely my point. Luthor, for all his flaws, acts. He sees an opportunity to advance his species and seizes it, unburdened by your endless moral committees. I will go to Geneva. I will stabilize the experiment before Luthor's ambition tears a hole in your planet's crust. You're not going anywhere, Superman said, floating into his path. Not until we have safeguards. Not until the League approves. The Emperor stopped, and the full weight of his psychic presence focused on Superman. The very light in the room seemed to bend toward him. You will not detain me, Kryptonian. Try me. For a long moment, they stood locked in a silent battle of wills. The air crackled with invisible energy. Wonder Woman's hand went to her sword, but she hesitated, caught between two immovable forces. It was Batman who broke the stalemate, his voice cutting through the tension. Stand down, Superman. Let him go. Superman didn't move. Bruce, I've analyzed the energy buildup in Geneva. If it isn't contained in the next 7 minutes, the resulting dimensional feedback will trigger a chain reaction that will unmake matter in a 200-kilometer radius. Switzerland, half of France, and most of northern Italy will cease to exist. He's the only one who understands the technology well enough to stop it. Batman's voice was grim. This isn't a test. This is a crisis, and he's the solution. The Emperor's gaze never left Superman's. You see? The hard choice, made by the man who lives in the shadows. Pragmatism, not idealism, will save millions of lives today. Superman slowly lowered himself to the floor, his face a storm of conflict. The Emperor walked past him without another word. As the door closed behind him, Superman looked at Wonder Woman. He's wrong, Diana. There has to be another way. Perhaps, she said softly. But today, Batman is right. We do not have the luxury of finding it. In the transport bay, the Emperor entered a Javelin shuttle, its systems activating at his mental command. As the craft launched toward Earth, he received a simultaneous, encrypted communication. It was not from Lex Luthor. The holographic image of Darkseid resolved in the cockpit. It seems your allies are more hindrance than help, the Lord of Apocalypse stated. Their morality is a cage. Apocalypse offers you a key, The technical specifications for a stabilized interdimensional portal are being transmitted to you now. Use them to contain Luthor's folly. Then consider my offer. A partnership between powers who are not afraid to do what is necessary. The Emperor reviewed the data streaming into the shuttle's computer. It was flawless. Brilliant engineering that solved problems he had anticipated would take Luthor weeks to overcome. I will consider it, the Emperor said, his eyes fixed on the approaching Earth. After I have cleaned up this mess. Darkseid's image faded, leaving the Emperor alone with the proof that in this universe, as in his own, true progress was often only possible through alliances with the devil. The LexCorp facility in Geneva was not burning, it was unraveling. The air shimmered with displaced reality, the building's architecture flickering between solid steel and ghostly, non-Euclidean geometries. A low-frequency hum vibrated through the ground, a sound that was less a noise and more a physical sickness. Swiss military cordons had been pushed back kilometers as the anomalous zone expanded, swallowing light and sound at its edges. The Emperor's javelin pierced the distortion field without slowing, its systems momentarily glitching before his will imposed order upon them. He landed in the central courtyard, where Lex Luthor stood before a pulsating sphere of raw energy, his face lit by a mixture of triumph and terror. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" Luthor shouted over the roar of tearing space-time. "The resonator worked. I've tapped into the dimensional substrate. But the containment matrix, it's failing. The equations you provided were incomplete." "The equations were sufficient for a controlled test, not for the full power activation you foolishly attempted," the Emperor stated, his voice cutting through the chaos with psychic force. He assessed the situation in a nanosecond. Luthor, in his ambition, had bypassed 3 critical safety protocols. The resonator was now drawing power directly from the local space-time continuum, creating a feedback loop that would soon become terminal. "I can still control it. I just need more power." Luthor manipulated a floating holographic console, his fingers a blur. "You will annihilate this continent." The Emperor's tone was flat, final. He raised his hands, and golden light erupted from him. Not to attack the energy sphere, but to weave a cage of psychic architecture around it. The unraveling of reality slowed, the flickering geometries stabilizing at the edges of his influence. It was a phenomenal display of power, a direct imposition of will upon the laws of physics. But the Emperor's brow furrowed in a rare show of strain. The energy was immense, rooted in DC's unique dimensional layers, resisting his warp-born mastery. It was the perfect moment for Darkseid to make his entrance. A boom tube tore open the sky directly above the facility, not with the usual explosive fury, but with a silent, surgical precision. Darkseid descended, not with an army, but alone. He landed between the Emperor and the struggling Luthor, his presence an anchor of absolute tyranny in the maelstrom. "The problem with working with lesser minds," Darkseid intoned, his gaze sweeping dismissively over Luthor, "is their inevitable failure to grasp the totality of a design." He raised a hand, and a beam of precise, black energy lanced from his palm, striking the resonator not to destroy it, but to recalibrate it. The violent oscillations ceased instantly. The sphere of energy compressed, becoming a stable, darkly shimmering portal. "The containment is stabilized, using Apocalypse's harmonic resonance technology." Luthor stared, his triumph turning to ashes in his mouth. He had been upstaged, his genius rendered obsolete by a superior power. The Emperor lowered his hands, the golden light fading. He looked from the stabilized portal to Darkseid. "Your assistance was efficient," Efficiency is the currency of power, Darkseid replied. This device is now a functional gateway. With minor adjustments, it can be tuned to the specific frequency of your home reality, something your current allies could not provide you for months, if ever. He gestured to the portal. The path home is before you, Emperor. All that remains is for you to walk it. The air crackled. 3 figures descended from a descending javelin. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. They had seen everything. Don't do it, Superman said, landing firmly. You don't know what he's done to it. This is a trap. All opportunities are traps for the unwary, the Emperor replied, his eyes fixed on the portal. And all alliances are transactions. Darkseid has provided the solution. You could not. He's provided a cage? Batman growled, his sensors already whirring as he analyzed the portal's energy signature. There's a secondary frequency embedded in the matrix, a tracking signal. The moment you go through, he'll know exactly where you arrived. He'll send an invasion force to your doorstep. Darkseid smiled, a small, cruel twisting of his lips. A reasonable precaution when dealing with an unknown universe. I would expect no less from him, and he should expect no less from me. It changes nothing. The gateway is real. The choice remains. The Emperor looked at the Justice League. He saw Superman's unwavering hope, Batman's pragmatic suspicion, Wonder Woman's conflicted honor. He saw the limitations of their world, a universe that still believed in second chances and clean victories. He looked at Darkseid. He saw a reflection of his own ruthless calculus, a being who understood that survival was a game of threats and leverages, with no room for sentiment. He looked at the portal. Beyond it, he could feel the distant, fading echo of the Astronomicon, the psychic scream of the Imperium he had built and abandoned. 1,000,000 worlds waited, teetering on the brink. His sons, both loyal and traitor, waged a war without end. This was the fulcrum, the point upon which 2 universes would turn. You are correct, Darkseid, the Emperor said, his voice resonating with absolute authority. The choice is mine, and I have made it. He did not step toward the portal. Instead, he raised a hand, and psychic force, refined and focused beyond anything he had yet demonstrated in this reality, slammed into the resonator. Not to open it wider, not to close it, to rewrite it. The portal shrieked, its dark light flaring a brilliant, painful gold. The embedded apocalyptian tracking signal was not merely disabled, it was seized, analyzed, and its principles inverted. What are you doing? Darkseid's voice lost its calm for the first time, edged with alarm. You sought to use me as a key, the Emperor said, his form blazing with psychic power. You sought to follow me into my universe and devour what remains of my Imperium in its moment of weakness. A pragmatic plan, an intelligent one. The golden light intensified, pouring into the portal. But I am not a key. I am a lock. With a final thunderous pulse of energy, the portal collapsed. But it did not vanish. It reconstituted itself into a different form. A shimmering, permanent wound in reality. A dimensional barrier that sealed itself over. I have not opened a door to my home, the Emperor announced, his voice echoing for miles. I have sealed this one. I have taken the principles of your boom tube technology and the resonator's power, and I have created a permanent null zone. No dimensional travel into or out of this universe will be possible within a 10-light-year radius of this planet for the next 10,000 years. The silence was absolute. The hum was gone. The distortion field had vanished. Darkseid stared, his plans, his invasion, his conquest of a new universe, annihilated in a single, stunning act of defiance. You strand yourself here? He hissed, pure, undiluted hatred in his eyes. I do, the Emperor said, turning his back on the portal, on Darkseid, on the path home. He faced the Justice League. My Imperium must survive or fall without me. It is a choice I made 10,000 years ago when I sat upon the Golden Throne, and I make it again today. I will not be the vector for this universe's destruction, nor will I allow my home to be devoured by a lesser tyrant. He looked at Superman. You asked me what I wanted. I want to see if your way works. I want to see if humanity can truly stand on its own, guided by hope rather than fear. It is an experiment I could never run in my own universe. Here I can. Darkseid let out a roar of pure fury, and the Omega effect gathered in his eyes. But before he could unleash it, the Emperor gestured, and a cage of golden light slammed down around the Lord of Apocalypse, containing him utterly. Your offer was appreciated, Darkseid, the Emperor said calmly. But I have chosen my side. I will protect this humanity for now. Not as their Emperor, but as a witness, and as their shield. The boom tube that had brought Darkseid flickered and died, severed by the Emperor's new dimensional lock. The Lord of Apocalypse was trapped, contained on Earth, outmaneuvered and defeated not by force alone, but by a choice he could never have predicted. The Emperor of Mankind had chosen to stay. The containment field holding Darkseid shimmered, a perfect sphere of golden energy that hummed with impossible power. Inside, the Lord of Apocalypse was motionless, a statue of pure rage, his crimson eyes burning with promises of eternal vengeance. But the cage held. It was a testament not to raw force, but to a precise, terrifying understanding of metaphysical law that even the new gods lacked. The Justice League stood in a loose semicircle, their postures a mixture of awe, relief, and deep-seated wariness. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the cost was now clear. The Emperor of Mankind was not leaving. Superman was the first to break the silence. You sacrificed your only way home. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement of profound disbelief. The needs of the many, the Emperor replied, his gaze sweeping over the stabilized Geneva facility. Lex Luthor had been quietly apprehended by Swiss authorities, his face a mask of bitter humiliation. A principle you espouse, but one I enact without flinching. Allowing Darkseid access to my universe was an unacceptable price. Allowing him to believe he could manipulate me was a strategic error I have now corrected. Batman stepped forward, his cowl's lenses focused on the Emperor. You've just altered the fundamental security of our entire solar system. You unilaterally created a dimensional quarantine. Who gave you that authority? I require no authority but my own judgment and the power to enforce it, the Emperor said, turning to face them fully. The psychic pressure in the air lessened, but did not vanish. It was now a permanent feature of the world, like gravity. This was not an act of conquest, it was an act of triage. Darkseid's dimensional technology was a cancer. I have excised it from this region of space. Your Earth is now safe from extra-universal incursions, boom tubes, and the kind of reckless experimentation Luthor attempted. Wonder Woman's hand rested on the hilt of her sword, a gesture of instinct rather than threat. You have made yourself our warden. I have made myself a participant, he corrected. A reluctant one. My initial assessment remains. Your methods are sentimental and inefficient, but they are not without merit. The fact that you exist, that a society capable of producing beings like you has not yet collapsed into the hellscape I am accustomed to, is a data point of immense value. He walked toward them, and for the first time, he seemed less a god and more a man. An impossibly ancient, powerful man, but one burdened by a choice that had cost him everything. I will not rule your earth. I have no desire to. My Imperium was a necessity, not an ambition. But I will not stand idle while threats emerge that you are philosophically unequipped to handle. So what happens now? Superman asked, the conflict still clear in his eyes. You just live here? I will observe, I will advise, and when necessary, I will act. The Emperor's gaze locked with Superman's. You wish to show me that your way could work. Very well. You have your chance. Lead humanity. Guide them with your hope. But know this, the moment your hope proves insufficient, the moment your compassion becomes a liability that threatens the species as a whole, I will intervene. And I will not ask for permission. The ultimatum hung in the air, a sword of Damocles forged over 40,000 years of brutal experience. And Darkseid? Batman gestured to the contained tyrant. He will be imprisoned in a facility of my design, a psychic labyrinth where his consciousness will be occupied for the foreseeable future. Attempting to kill a new god of his power is messy and ultimately temporary. Containing him is the more pragmatic solution. The Emperor looked up at the sky, as if he could see through the atmosphere to the stars beyond, to the universe he had forever abandoned. My war is over. My great work is finished. I am now a relic in a world that never asked for me. But I am here, and I will do what I have always done, ensure the survival and progression of humanity. The methodology may differ, but the goal remains. He turned and began to walk away, his form already beginning to fade, not into invisibility, but into a state of semi-existence, his attention turning inward to the monumental task of building a prison for a god. Where will you go? Wonder Woman called after him. Everywhere and nowhere. His voice was already becoming an echo in their minds. I will be watching. And then he was gone. The golden containment sphere holding Darkseid solidified into a featureless obsidian monolith, silent and impregnable. The crisis was over. The world was safe. But everything had changed. On the Watchtower, in the Batcave, in the halls of the Pentagon, in the secret meetings of the Justice League Dark, the same realization dawned. Earth was no longer just under the protection of its heroes. It was under the scrutiny of a father who had returned from a war beyond comprehension, a father who loved his children with a terrifying, absolute, and merciless love, and who was now watching, waiting to see if they could live up to his impossible standards. The experiment had begun. The arrival of the Emperor of Mankind did not bring fire and conquest to the DC universe, but something far more subtle and profound. A permanent, unblinking judgment. He became the universe's most formidable spectator, a guardian who did not believe in the goodness of those he guarded, but in their potential for ordered survival. His sacrifice, stranding himself forever from his own dying Imperium, was not born of love for this new world, but from a cold calculation that its destruction or its corruption by Darkseid was an unacceptable outcome. In the end, his pragmatic heart could not justify being the catalyst for another apocalypse. His presence reshaped the balance of power entirely. Darkseid was neutralized, not by a heroic blow, but by a superior intellect. The Justice League found their moral authority challenged not by a villain, but by a savior whose methods were a constant, uncomfortable mirror. Lex Luthor's ambitions were humbled, Amanda Waller's control was bypassed, and the magical community was forced to accept a power that operated outside their understanding. The Emperor did not become a hero in their eyes, nor a villain. He became a condition of reality, like a law of physics. Sometimes invisible, always present, and absolutely unforgiving when violated. He offered the DC Universe a chance to prove that hope and freedom could triumph, all while standing ready to revoke that chance the moment it failed. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there was only war. In the hopeful brightness of the DC Universe, there was now a watchful, ancient God from that darkness, waiting to see if light alone was truly enough. The question was no longer, what if the Emperor arrived? But what will he do now that he has decided to stay?